The Oil and Gas Moment, brought to you by Petroleum Authority of Uganda, creating lasting value in Uganda's oil journey. The development and commercialization of Uganda's oil and gas resources is being undertaken through 4 flagship projects, which will bring in investment over $15 billion into the economy. The Kingfisher project will produce 40,000 barrels of crude oil per day at peak. The Tilenga project will produce 190,000 barrels of crude oil per day at peak. The 1,443-kilometer east
Good evening, members. Hello, fellow delegates. Good evening. Thank you and welcome to this session. This is a session on value addition in oil and gas. And first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Joseph Otieno, as you heard in the ballroom. I'm a geologist at the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum of the Republic of Kenya. So, since we are pressed of time, the session will rather be quite short. We'll have 5 minutes presentations each, and 5 minutes of Q&A. So, without much ado, allow me to welcome the first presenter, who is Mr. Lukman Jamaldin. Lukman Jamaldin is a petroleum engineer at the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum in the Republic of Kenya. He has over 10 years experience in oil and gas. Prior to his current role, Lukman worked with the National Oil Corporation of Kenya as a supply analyst. He has a Master's of Oil and Gas Technologies from the Heriot-Watt University. He also holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, Chemical Engineering and Process Engineering from Moi University. Further to that, he has a diploma in physical metering of hydrocarbons liquids from the Norwegian Society of Oil and Gas and Measurements. So Lukman will present a paper, and the title of his paper is, just a minute. Reducing flaring and the alternatives to flaring in oil and gas. So, Lukman, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes. And if we could keep it short, the better for us.
Yeah, hi guys. I know I'm just starting like 3 hours late, so I'll be very brief. The presentation, please. Anyway, so even as they put it, oh, it's up already. So my very brief talk will be on what are the alternatives to routine flaring. Flaring can be routine, where it's done daily. There are some countries in Africa like Libya, Nigeria, where the lights never go out from flaring. So we are seeking to find alternatives to that. The outline is very basic, that we'll go through the flaring data, the reasons, the case for Kenya, the alternatives that exist. And then from the alternatives, we'll look at what alternatives are working for Kenya, and then the preliminary economics for the same, and the conclusion. So the global flaring data and the impact of the same is first, I think 10 countries in the world contribute 70% of the flaring. And out of those 10, according to the World Bank, 3 of them are in Africa. So the case that we are trying to forestall is the case of Kenya and Uganda, that we do not join Libya, Nigeria, and Algeria to be amongst the lists of those who will be flaring natural gas. So the impacts is that to the environment, it increases the greenhouse gases. Amongst them, they are carcinogens, according to Petri et al. And the acidic gas, that is, as a result also, it leads to a decrease in agricultural production due to burning the leaves. Approximately 357 trillion cubic feet is flared each year. If it was sold, it will be approximately 16 billion USD. Why do the IOCs flare, or whoever is flaring, why do they flare? The reasons are broadly into these 3 categories. Maybe economic and technical reasons, that it does not make sense to do something, utilize the gas, because there are no pipelines, there's no existing infrastructure and such. Or maybe technical reasons, that it does not make sense to construct that pipeline, or there is no viable use at the time. Or regulatory reasons, like in Nigeria, where the law is ambiguous on what to do with the gas once you find it. And sometimes during operations it's for safety reasons, that if the system is pressurized, then you just have to flare. So we'll be looking at how we can eliminate economic, technical, and regulatory reasons. Safety is unavoidable. So normally the narrative or from the production is that in the first years, 0 to 10 years, we have a lot of gas production, which can be used mostly for power generation and water view for the CPF. Then after that, most of the gas will be flared. Also during the first 10 years, there are cases where there is some gas that they will use, and there's an extra amount which they normally will say that we did not find an alternative, so we are flaring. So what alternatives exist to flaring? As I mentioned, is that they normally justify flaring by saying that there's no available infrastructure. Customarily, it's just they'll look whether there's a gas pipeline near, or whether there are manufacturing industries near, anywhere that can use the gas. And once they do not get that, they will propose flaring. So the potential alternatives, you might re-inject for CO2, for secondary oil recovery. But this is also dependent on the geology, and then the costs of such injection wells and the injectivity tests. It's a long process. You might generate power through it, or make petrochemicals, or LPG, or gas to liquid. So before you look into any of those, there is a criteria that definitely you'll have to go through to see which solution is feasible for your case. So according to whether there is ready market, which is normally the biggest challenge, the bottleneck, the viability, and the associated infrastructure. For instance, in power generation, you will need to subsequently make a substation and the power lines to transmit the power to wherever it's going and such things. So using these criteria, we looked into those potential uses and came up with an LPG plant, proposed an LPG plant, and a mini gas to liquid. The reason for the same is that LPG can be used at site. Just for context, according to Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Kenya imports approximately 372,000 metric tons of LPG yearly. So whatever volume we'll be able to make from the gas will reduce that amount. Then the other reason why I propose the mini GTL, gas to liquid. The traditional gas to liquid will reform the gas. It will break the gas into hydrogen and carbon, which is called syngas. And then through the Fischer-Tropsch process, it will make a synthetic crude, which will then be cracked to make diesel and naphtha, which will then be added to the refined products. So the proposal here is that at the point of the FT reactor, Fischer-Tropsch, that you leave it as syn crude, and then you mix it together with the crude oil. Also, from the LPG system, you will get some condensate, which as well you will mix with the crude oil. The mixing of the LPG together with the syn crude will make your crude to be more valuable, because it will increase the fraction of the light ends. So the yields for the same are, for LPG, for each million scf per day, standard cubic feet, approximately 10% of that can be converted to LPG. And gas to liquid, you'll get about, from each million, you'll get about 100 barrels. So using that criteria, so that the yields will be approximately 2.8 tons annually. This is assuming 1 million, a very low volume of 1 million standard cubic feet per day will give you approximately 2.8 tons daily of LPG and approximately 28,000 barrels of synthetic crude annually. Then the plants were assumed to have 90% availability, meaning that 330 days out of 365 they were working. So using that data for OPEX, the CAPEX were taken from the global gas flaring data by the World Bank and cross-checked against similar projects in the world. So using the CAPEX and the OPEX values, and the price of LPG according to KNBS is $700 per metric ton, and the price of crude, as at that time, it was $70 per barrel. So it showed that using that CAPEX and OPEX, running the profit and loss statement, it showed that the project is viable with an NPV of approximately 5 million USD and an IRR of 31% and payback of approximately 7 years. So from the reasons for flaring that we already saw, economical and technical, regulatory and safety, now we are going back to the conclusions after running through this. That after looking at mini LPG and the GTL, which will make the synthetic crude and mix it with the crude oil, it's seen to be viable. These are class 4 costs, but even refining the same will still make it viable. So this is a technical and economical way of disposing the gas. Apart from the health benefits of the LPG, which are numerous, I just listed one. So in terms of regulatory proposals that are proposed to be changed subsequently in Kenya and maybe Uganda and other countries, is that we shall ensure that the policies have sufficiently high penalties. Sometimes the penalties are quite low, that the IOC might choose to flare, so that they can easily afford the penalty. So the penalties should be quite high, that it is prohibitive to flare. Then the law should as well require that no flaring at all, eliminate routine flaring. Then the same has to be regulated, because for instance in Nigeria, the laws has been there, but as I started by saying, the lights never go out, the lights of flaring. And such, the GTL and the LPG have been proven records in Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and even the USA. So it's something that can be done. With that, I think I've used more than 5 minutes. Thank you.
Let's appreciate Lukman. And to the audience, it's good to know that there are options to flaring, so all is not lost. The next presentation is from Clara Aurora, who will present on a modern geochemical laboratory and cold storage facilities. And she's going to give a case study on National Oil Corporation of Kenya. But before I invite her to the podium, Clara is a petroleum geochemist. Right now she's working with the National Oil Corporation of Kenya. Clara, she's well-rounded academically. She has an industrial background in petroleum geochemistry, analytical and industrial chemistry. She holds an undergraduate degree in industrial chemistry from the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. She has an MSc in petroleum geochemistry from the Newcastle University in the UK. Currently, she works as a petroleum geochemist and is passionate about analytical chemistry, geochemistry, and geology as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's applaud Clara as she comes to the podium. Thank you, Clara. 6 minutes.
Good afternoon. So my presentation is on our modern geochemical laboratory and cold storage facility at the National Oil Corporation of Kenya, just a sensitization on what our modern facilities will offer. So I'll briefly take you through an introduction into our facilities, then the upgrade that you're currently doing, the services offered, the cold storage facilities, and the way forward or the vision to our facilities. So briefly, our facilities were set up in 1992, and their main objective was to offer laboratory analytical services as well as storage of geochemical and geological services in order to capture the or take care of the exploration activities within the country, and also to offer these services to clients. So the laboratory offers analytical services to rock samples, soil, sediments, as well as fluid samples. The cold storage offers the services of managing and storing both geological and geochemical samples. So most of specialized analytical services are not offered within the region. So this forces most IOCs to procure these services out of the country. So National Oil is modernizing or upgrading its facilities in order to capture or to take advantage of the emerging exploration activities within the region, as well as take care of the mining industry, as well as the evolving energy industry. And with this, the National Oil is modernizing its facilities in order to have facilities with extended capabilities, taking advantage of the new technology, upgrading the facilities with state-of-the-art equipment, and currently we are in the concluding stage of shipping the equipment as well as securing ISO accreditation. So the upgrade attracted the interests of World Bank, and through different international consulting companies, we were able to have strategies, capacity building, the layout and design of the lab, as well as the procuring of the equipment. And some of these companies that National Oil has consulted with are companies like Weatherford, Pan-African Petroleum companies, Phillips Consulting, who together we are able to come up with strategies, including economic model, and also in order to be able to commercialize our facilities. So our facilities are set to be operational by the second half of this year, which is, the timing is being very critical to our developments in the Lokichar Basin, that is the tertiary rift basin, as well as the open block ranking, that licensing round. So, So some of the geological and chemical services that are offered within our lab is sample preparation. We have very elaborate and efficient systems, sample management systems, which take care of the sample from the time the sample gets into the lab to the cycle of procedures, all the way to data processing, as well as extraction of the sample, which is very vital going into molecular characterization of the samples. Mineralogy, we have the state-of-the-art microscope, that is the scanning electron microscope, petrographic microscopes that are able to efficiently look at a mineral composition of rocks. Bulk geochemical analysis, we know that this is very vital in screening of source rock samples, because we need to know, do our source rocks have the right amounts of organic richness? What's the quality of the source rock? And again, the maturity of the source rock. So we have an array of equipment that look into that. That is the latest leak analyzer, Hawk analyzers. We also have the bomb calorimeters, which look at the energy content of fuels. So in this, we are even able to look at the quality checks for biofuels. We also have an array of equipment that do petrophysical testing. That is the automatic helium porosity and permeability that look at characterization of reservoirs, as well as the flash point tester, the viscometers, the clad point tester. These are equipment that are very vital in looking at quality checks for refined petroleum products as well as biofuels. So you can see that we are also taking care of the evolving energy industry, not just petroleum products, but also the different products that are coming up in order to take care of the energy industry in Africa. So apart from that, we also have the molecular characterization, state-of-the-art GCs that look at the molecular characterization. Now this is going deeper into looking at the for a source rock, for example, looking at the depositional environment, the saturations, which is very key now in determining the quality of a source rock, which is now gives us a clue on whether a source rock on maturity will it produce an oil or will it produce a gas. So all this information that is provided by all this equipment is very vital in making decisions in exploration and production. So we also have a cold storage facility where our samples are stored in the most efficient manner in order to preserve the integrity of the samples. And you know that data is very important, because from data is whereby we make key decisions in exploration and production. So we have our cold storage facility with ambient controls, that is temperature, humidity, in order to preserve the integrity of our samples. We also have systems whereby that we can be able to store, track, and retrieve samples in the most smooth manner as possible. We also have a dynamic database where we catalog our samples from the point they get into our facility, from IOCs, from the different clients, whereby we can be able to store our samples efficiently. And we know that in this digital era, visual information is very important. So that's why we have taken care of this by doing the co-photography and digitization, whereby we have the most latest scanning cameras, where we take visual images of the core samples to integrate them with the data reports that you have in a data management. And with that, you also have the viewing rooms that is equipped with UV fluorescence, that we are able to have a visual description of our cores, as well as look at any traces of hydrocarbons that we could be having in our core samples. So with this is the lab. That is, the infrastructure is ready to receive the equipment, and with this we will be able to be the regional hub for geochemical, geological, as well as petrophysical and engineering studies. So what's the way forward? The way forward is that geochemical facilities, they've been proven that the services can be commercialized, and this study was done by World Bank. So this is also a recommendation to policymakers to enable regional geochemical services to be procured within the continent. And also with this, we'll be able to provide analysis for exploration, mining companies, and also environmental research communities. Also institutions, research firms, universities can able to make use of our facilities. So with this, we're also able to collaborate with other upstream companies and institutions in order to have exchange programs for technology and capacity building. And also with R&D, we are able to have multidisciplinary approach to problem solving and also joint regional studies. So we also have data availability, which will open up new research into the resources within Africa or within the region. So with these state-of-the-art or world-class facilities, we'll be able to offer cost-effective, reliable, and timely services that we can be able to take care of all exploration activities and also the evolving energy industry. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause. Thank you, Clara, for giving us insights into what a modern geochemical lab looks like. And it's good to know that NOC is working towards having a modern lab in Kenya. Now, the next presenter is Mr. Stephen Kipchumba Rono, Stephen Kipchumba Rono, who is going to present on value addition in oil and gas development. Just to give who Stephen is a petroleum technologist at the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum in Kenya. Stephen has over 3 years experience and is equipped with skills in aerial mapping and geophysical survey. Stephen is a very active and proficient technologist. He has interest in petroleum exploration technology and mainly focuses in the upstream subsector. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, allow me to invite Stephen on the stage and kindly give him applause as he joins.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for that. I'm going to take you through value addition in oil and gas infrastructure development in East Africa community. I'm going to take you through introduction. The oil and gas sector plays an important role in the global economy. Many developing countries rich in hydrocarbons resources continue to rely on this sector for revenue and growth. Research into this prospect of oil and gas markets has come into handy recently. This mainly due to projection of increase in oil and gas activities in Africa. Objectives. To identify necessary infrastructure required to support value addition in oil and gas development in East African community. To analyze the challenges that East Africa faces in attracting and facilitating investment in infrastructure for oil and gas value addition. To discuss potential benefits of oil and gas value addition developments for East Africa. What were the findings? We did look at the challenges facing East African sector, including security concerns, legal barriers, and general lack of infrastructure. In many of our countries, we face a lot of challenges in terms of insecurity, in terms of the making of legal frameworks. Those are challenges that faces this hinders this development of these infrastructure projects. With the increased demand of oil and gas products, cross-border gas pipeline infrastructure is required to connect places where gas will be in high demand. Places that gas are required, there is no gas infrastructure, that's gas pipeline. Refining facilities such as petrochemical plants is a crucial requirement to process the crude oil into higher value products such as petrochemical, diesels, and gasoline. Many of our countries lack these refinery facilities. And if we had these refinery facilities, we could have realized this development, value addition could be realized in our countries. Policy intervention. The government, what should the government do to enhance this development, to realize this development? One, this by creating or create a conducive environment for this investment to take place. Put policy frameworks for development for the sector. By putting up policy frameworks that favors the investment, that it will help the country and the sector to grow. Provide financial tax incentives to attract investment. Ensuring involvement with local communities to foster security. By involving these communities, we enhance a lot of development. Two, foster sustainable development by proper utilization of resources, addressing environmental social impacts. This by regulating pollution of environments, that is, promote sustainable economic growth, and continuously develop, maintain infrastructure facilities such as LAPSET and East African crude oil pipelines. Opportunities. What are the opportunities from this value addition? Construction. What is construction? They are constructing these facilities such as pipelines, refineries, storage tanks, and other facilities. Private sector and the government can get opportunities from this sector by constructing these infrastructures that are needed for value addition. Financial services. Financing these infrastructures is capital intensive, so we need private sector investors to finance some of these infrastructures, and that's how they can get opportunity to grow their business. Local content. Investing by developing local content in areas of development, such as capacity building, workforce training, is an excellent opportunity for private sector investment. In conclusion, the exploration and exploitation of petroleum resources in East Africa present significant opportunities for sustainable energy and socio-economic development. The private sector has a key role to play in these processes. The petroleum resources should be shared equitably, and the industry needs to develop a responsible and sustainable way that supports long-term growth and development. Thank you.
Let's give him another round of applause. We've been able to see what opportunities are available in the oil and gas and how we can add value, and what are the issues which are preventing countries from adding that value. Now, last but not least, the last presentation for this session is from Mr. Gilbert Mugenyi. Mr. Gilbert Mugenyi will present a case study on the Albertine Rift Basin, where he looked at the depositional environments using modern-day analogs. That is with a focus on Kalondo Sinistral Spit, and Toroko Active Spit, Kaiso Spit, and the Tonya Lagoon. But before I invite him, let me just tell the audience who Gilbert is. Gilbert is a geologist, is a reservoir geologist at the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. He has over 5 years experience in the upstream oil and gas industry. Prior to being appointed as a geologist, that is at the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, Gilbert served as the operations manager, that is at G&G Skills. And he has also served as a consultant at the Uganda Petroleum Institute at Kigumba. Gilbert holds a BSc in Petroleum Geoscience and Production from Makerere University, and is currently pursuing a postgraduate diploma in project planning and management. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Gilbert on stage to give us his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, in the interest of time, I will move on. As it comes, I explain what I will have maybe skipped. So, like it's already put forward, yeah, this is, I'm presenting findings from a field study of the Albertine Rift Basin deposition environments using modern day analogs. And I concentrated basically on the spits and lagoons. So in brief, a spit is any mass of beach-like land that extends from the land into the water. And then a lagoon is any part of the water that has been cut off from the lake. That's the brief introduction I can give to that. So, yes, this is, so by this map, I'm able to show you the areas. These areas are in the Albertine Graben. This is the Kaiso Spit and the Tonya Lagoon. And up we have the Ntoroko Active Spit Complex, and then the Karondo Sinistral Spit. The main reason for doing this, to make it a bit simple, is that you may have a look at what is happening in the modern day environment, and then use it to infer to what happened in the past. And that's what you would now have in the subsurface. So that's what all this study is all about. So we did this by several techniques. One of them is geotraversing, which is common with geologists. Then the augering. Here we were augering up to about 40 centimeters. That's less than a meter, so literally we are still dealing with the modern day environment or the deposits. We applied an aerial photography with a drone. This was to help us get near surface images and have a clear understanding of what happens on the side of a lagoon and what happens on the side of the lake. Then we used as well the normal geologic mapping equipment, which include the compass, the hand lens, to be able to define the grain size. So after doing all this, what were the results? So across the spit, having done a transect across the spit as seen in that red line, we were able to find out that from the lagoon side towards the lake, the grain size of the sediments increases as one moves from the lagoon to the lake. So by augering across the spit, those were the findings as per the attached images. Then we also noticed that these variations are as a result of the changes in the energy. In the side of a lagoon, you literally have no wave activity because it's cut off from the lake. And then along the shoreline of the lake, you have a lot of wave activity, and this tends to break down the grains and make them a bit angular, a bit rounded, and then it is well sorted because of the wave activity. The winnowing by the waves causes that kind of those kind of results in the grains. Then, of importance to note, you're doing this to infer to the subsurface, what is happening in the subsurface. So, if you went to an ancient outcrop and found some of these gastropods, the point is so small. If you found, for instance, such gastropods and bivalve shells, then it would inform you to start thinking of, could this be possibly a shoreline? Because it's along the shoreline that we were able to find numerous gastropods and the shells. Then in case, for instance here, we also found that along the shoreline, we had some feldspars, we had some angular grains. These also tell us the distance that these grains have really moved. And to be clear to you, it wasn't so long. These were actually carried from the escarpment down into the lake. It's not so long. That's why we have them a bit angular to subangular. Then the presence of the feldspars in here still tell us that these are very young sediments. And then these feldspars would, in future, okay, in geologic time, decompose to form the clays, and those clays would have a great impact on the porosity and the permeability within your potential reservoirs. So, what would happen across a spit in cases of transgression and regression? So whenever you have a transgressive event, then you would have your spit covered. Where you literally had the beach sand, it is now going to be treated as deep lacustrine, and you're going to deposit some clay on it. Then you get to have a season of regression. You expose your spit. Once it is exposed, then what was previously the clay is now you're going to have the sands deposited on it. And if such sequences occur over millions of years, that's what geologists understand better. In millions of years, you would have the alternating sequences of sand, clay, and that's what this cartoon is talking about. So what is of value to government? What is of value once it comes to policy implication? It can be a tool that one can use to link the subsurface to the surface lithophases. And then I will not go through all of them. I see he's already standing next to me. But of importance is that you can use it as a baseline, as your baseline data for areas that have no exposures in case you're doing exploration. And then this same technique can be used in areas where you literally don't have any data available. For instance, you go to a virgin land, you can rely on this. It is less costly. You can use it to relate one basin to another basin elsewhere, and it's handy, I should say. And then in terms of biostratigraphy and age dating, given the gastropods and the bivalve shells we saw, you can have those, you can have some of those kept within your formation, preserved, and therefore you can use it to carry out age dating. Then for the private sector, those are always looking at how much money they can make from such a technique. Yes, it is very low. It is of very low cost when it comes to sedimentary field studies. You literally have all the information at play that you may need for basic studies. It is the quickest technique you can use to scan your study area or while doing your investigations. You can as well identify a working petroleum system using this technique. It is not only limited to what I've displayed here. You can apply it even in fluvial, even in transitional environments, even in areas where you have the ice and all that. It can work there. You can as well use it to support the available geologic data and also predict the reservoir diagnetic processes. For instance, we saw the impact of the feldspars. So if you have them, you know that now deep in your reservoirs, you possibly have the clays. And how do you deal with them? This can be a guiding tool. Finally, you can use it to predict the reservoir behavior under no overburden conditions. In the case of the modern, there isn't an effect of pressure, okay? So you can now start thinking, if I deplete my reservoir of its natural pressure, this is what I should expect by just looking at what you have in the modern environment. That's all I had for you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gilbert. Let's give him a better round of applause. And I know geology sometimes can be quite heavy, especially in the evening. I know the non-geologists are wondering what are gastropods, what are these pits, what are the lagoons. But I encourage you to have, maybe during cocktail, just have a sitting with him so that you're able to understand more. But thanks, Gilbert, for sharing your study and giving us an appreciation of the analogs, the modern analogs, and how you can utilize them to determine the depositional environment. So, ladies, I'll open, time is not on our side, so I'll open a Q&A session. So, in case you have any question to any of the presenters, then I think this is the opportunity. So, I'll share this mic, so just lift your hand and just introduce yourself, who the question is directed to, and then I will be able to take one or two questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, is it good? It's already good evening, eh? Yeah, we have said for a long time now. Yeah, I want to ask for the first presenter about gas flaring. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Simon Nyago. I am the the operations manager for NilePet, which is the National Oil and Gas Corporation for South Sudan. We have the case of gas flaring, which is actually a problem. We have done analysis on it. It is not economical. I was very ambitious to see and to know the alternatives that we can go for in case we don't want, or we want zero flaring. You mentioned some of the alternatives. Okay. You mentioned some of the alternatives. But in my view, the other alternatives are actually when the gas flared is economically viable for some companies, but they are not interested in it. But in our case, we have done analysis, and it was found that, and we have also done economic analysis, and it was found that it was totally uneconomical. So I will wonder what you will advise. What is the alternative now? Because I see there is no alternative you mentioned there for gas which is not economical. You see, yeah. This is number one. Number two, I think, is a general question. Maybe is for our big moderator. In the title of of our session, we have the energy transition. And all the presenters have not touched anything on it. I don't know, maybe you will touch it later. This is my concern also.
Thank you. There was a hand here. Yes.
Thank you, team, for presentation. Lukman, Clara, Stephen, and Gilbert. I'm Joski Kisali from Kenya, Minister of Energy and Petroleum. I'm a geologist. The first question, just in addition to what he has asked, the presentation by Gilbert, I wanted to know what is the value addition. Of course, in terms of research or geological is okay, but what is the value addition to that? Then I have a question to Lukman. How sustainable are these mini LPGs and GTL's plans, so that we keep crying of the Dutch disease? Maybe how sustainable, because we don't know if these resources are long, for how long, because you put a plant maybe for 3 years, so is that sustainable? So maybe you can respond on that. Then lastly, on Clara, you know, she talked about the benefits of the core lab or upgrading it. So what is the cost of doing that, so that you are able to appreciate the benefits? Then the facilities were installed in 1992. So it's upgrading or replacing, you know, what is the best option and what is the cost? Because, you know, you cannot talk about benefits, revenue, if you don't know the cost. Thank you, Chair.
Maybe if we could get a lady, just maybe one last question from a lady. Okay. Then I think for the sake of time, then I'll invite our presenters to respond to the questions. So I'll start by Lukman. Lukman, I believe there are 3 questions. There are 2 questions. Yeah, 3 questions. 2 or 3. So if you could respond to them, please.
Yeah, thank you. Shukran to my brother from Nile. I'm actually a relative. I'm a Nubian from Kibra. Anyway, you asked about alternative for flaring gas if it is not economical. So in this case, in the Kenyan case, I was looking at a flow rate of 1 million standard cubic feet per day. And maybe if you can share more what your flow rates are. And also the proposals that I gave was that we should take out the LPG and use it at source. It was approximately 6.7 tons daily of LPG. And then the rest of the crude, there was some bit of chemical engineering from my background, and it was converted to synthetic crude and mixed with the crude oil. So those were 2 proposals. First, take out the LPG, use it for domestic use. That can be applied universally, regardless of where you are, because LPG is used and the world is moving towards that as a fuel. Then the next proposal was that convert it into synthetic crude and mix it with the crude oil. Also, the condensate from the LPG will be mixed with the crude oil. The both of them add value to your crude oil, because you know the value of the crude oil is dependent on the amount of light ends that you will find. So maybe if you find me behind the tent, then we can look at the case of your own and the compositions of the same, and then definitely we'll come up with a proposal. Then the next question was on the sustainability, depending on the length of the production. In this case, from the profile that I showcased, the 1 million standard cubic feet was available for 25 years. But the beauty of these mini plants is that they can be added according to how much volume you have or removed. So if you have more volume, we are looking at only 1 million scarf, but it can go up to 10, 15, 20 for full-size plants. So depending on how much flow rate of gas you have, you can add the sections of the same mini plants or remove when the gas is not that much. I think those were my two questions, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Lukman, for the response. The next question was to Clara. So, Clara, I hope you noted them down. Yeah. What are the benefits of coal laboratory? Then the cost of upgrading versus something like that. Yeah.
Okay, on the cold storage facility, the economic model was done by World Bank, and it has three main levels. We have the short-term and long-term, short-term, mid-term, and long-term benefits that we could reap from the data that could be obtained, or the data that we could be accessed from our storage, from the samples that will be stored within our facilities. The short term were about, so the upgrade of the, let me start afresh. We already have a cold storage facility, but what we are doing is we are upgrading the facility in order to take care of the emerging operations, or the operations that are currently being done within the country, and also to take care basically of even more samples that will be incoming into the facility. And with that, I don't have the exact estimates, but definitely the revenue that we'll be getting from clients and IOCs being able to assess, or to being able to access the data, will definitely overlook what we'll be putting into upgrading the facility.
Thank you, Clara. I think the last question was to Gilbert, and I think it was from Joski. It was the issue of value addition in whatever he presented, if I got it right. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your question, Joski. Okay. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. Yes, in terms of value addition, I said this technique, you're just analyzing the surface, so it can easily help you scan what is in the subsurface. You've already cut off some costs by that. For instance, you want to avoid scenarios where you have to go in, start with, for instance, aeromagnetic surveys. You go in to do seismic. You go in to drill a well. But you're going to a virgin place where you do not have to perform all this, and you need the preliminary data to start with. This can be it can be a very cost-effective process or technique that can guide you do that. Already, that's of great value to me. It's already cutting cost. I don't know if I answer you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert, and thanks, delegates. In case your question has not been answered, or you have other questions, then you can, during cocktail, you can see the presenters. Then my brother here, there was the last question, which was addressed to me, and I think that was on energy transition, if I got you right. Yeah. The issue of energy transition, I think, I hope you are in the ballroom. Yeah, it was sufficiently addressed by our seniors there, from all the partner states. And as for the program, yes, I know there was the issue of energy transition. but we didn't have a paper on energy, specifically on energy transition. That's why you are not seeing any presentation from. But within the other presentations, there'll be one or two where energy transition will be discussed. And I know one of my colleagues has a paper, something touching on that. So just go through the program and see where that paper is presented, and you'll be able to get. So, ladies and gentlemen, that marks the end of this session. Let me thank you, and let's give applause to both the presenters and the delegates. So, without much taking much more time, let's also appreciate the team back there, and also the rapporteur for their support. Thank you. I understand there were to be some tokens presented to the presenters, but I'm sure the EAC will work on that. Thank you. So have a lovely evening and enjoy the cocktail. For us, our session is over, but feel free to remain behind for the next session.
Okay, good evening, participants. Good evening once more. Are we together? Vincent. The session continues. As you heard from the MC when we were in the plenary hall, is that we are going to have 2 sessions per each breakout session hall. What we've just completed was the session on value addition in oil and gas development and energy transition, which was moderated by Joseph Otieno. The same session continues. We still have value addition in oil and gas development and energy transition, which I'll moderate. I think in the interest of time, the same ground rules that Otieno set for the previous session continue to apply. We have 4 presenters. I think it will be fair to give them maybe 5-6 minutes. And then for each, we are going to take a number of questions after the presentations. Our presenters for this session, the first one will be Engineer Tobias Magige, who will give us a presentation on petroleum value addition in oil and gas development in East Africa. Is Tobias in the room? Tobias Magige? He's not. The next presentation will be by Mr. Idi Katana. Idi, I can see you. Third presentation by Engineer Daniel Charles Rukono. Is Rukono with us? No? Okay. Then the last one will be by Solomon Kiptui on the state of energy transition in Kenya. Kiptui? Okay, Kiptui is present with us. Is our rapporteur present? Ebenezer Molel? Ebenezer? He's not. In that case, can I task one of us to be our rapporteur? Jamal? Can you take up that role? Okay. Thank you. Okay, because of time, I don't want to stand in between you and the cocktail that's coming up. Then let's have the first presentation by Mr. Idi Katana Nzaro, who is a geochemist at the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum from the Republic of Kenya. He's going to give us a brief presentation on crude oil to petrochemicals, a strategy to diversify EAC economic growth. Welcome, Idi.
Thank you, moderator. Good evening, colleagues. My name's Idi Katananzaro. I'm a geochemist working with the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum, Kenya. And I'm also a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry. Will you please project my presentation? So I have already introduced myself. The outline of my presentation is as shown here. Background objective of the study, distribution of crude oil refineries, the analysis, the business opportunity presented, and a case of the Yambu crude oil to chemicals project in Saudi Arabia, and also the policy interventions that are required for us to progress with this. On to the background. Crude oil is a core energy source that has fostered enormous economic growth in or across the globe. Countries such as Saudi Arabia, Russia, USA, and the likes have amassed a lot of wealth from petroleum resources. Japan, for instance, has 27 refineries, of which it does not have any petroleum resources. So you can imagine the type of investment that these people put across without having petroleum resources. Into our continent, we have substantial petroleum resources that can bolster our economy. Within the East African community, there has been significant discoveries in the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, in here Uganda, and also in Kenya lately. Even in Tanzania, we have seen that they have quite enough resources on, that is natural gas resources. Within the East African community region, only South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo are producing oil and sell it to the market. But often than not, these countries do sell this crude without any enrichment, thus they deriving a minute value from it. Uganda is also expecting to develop its resources in the Albertine Graben. With the climatic change policies or even actions, we expect that the demand for crude oil for transportation fuels to decline globally. Within the region, we import all our petrochemical products. The objectives of this study are to determine the distribution and status of crude oil refineries in the East African community region. We will also assess the status of the petrochemical industry and also identify the most resilient sectors of the petroleum value chain for future investment decisions in light of the climate change policies. So we studied the distribution of crude oil refineries within the region, and we identified that there is only one operating refinery in the region in South Sudan, that is Bentiu Refinery, with a capacity of only 10,000 barrels a day. Refineries in Kenya, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and also Democratic Republic of Congo ceased operations. Uganda is currently approved the FEED for its refinery in 2022, and the FID for this project is projected to be undertaken in this year. We also have the Tanzania Mbolea and Petrochemical Company that is also in the pipeline, but details of which we couldn't acquire. We analyzed data from the World Energy Outlook report that was published in 2022 to look at the scenarios, the policies that were undertaken by several countries, how they will impact on the crude oil demand, probably for transportation fuels as well as for petrochemicals. So in these scenarios, we have the stated policy scenario, which now indicates the actions that have been taken by countries up to September 2022. We look at the announced pledges scenario, whereby these are the actions that countries have pledged to undertake between 2030 and 2050, and we'll also look at the net zero emission scenario. So looking at these two other charts here, we can see that with the net zero emissions, we can see that if all countries implement the net zero emission policies, then the demand for crude oil for transportation fuels will fall significantly between 2030 and 2050. But again, looking at the demand for crude oil for petrochemicals, we identify that even though the demand will fall, but it will not be as significant as it will have fallen for demand for transport fuels. The crude oil to petrochemicals presents business opportunities in the upstream and downstream chemical sector, where in the upstream section we look at the production of high-value chemicals, we look at production of ammonia, methanol, and so on. Under the downstream section, we have the production of polymers that include plastics, synthetic rubber, and synthetic fibers. We also have the agrochemicals and further the production of specialty chemicals such as industry catalysts. Keith Koch, the Senior Director, Business Development and Integrated Project at Honeywell UOP, says that you can sell fuels at $550 a ton or convert them further to petrochemicals and get around $1,400 a ton. And then this means the value of petrochemicals is worth threefold that of fuels. So the policy interventions include development of a crude to chemical strategy for the production of high-value chemicals. We intend to develop petrochemical industries in each member state that will be fed from the upstream chemical sector. We're also looking at establishment of policy statements that will ring-fence the upstream and downstream trade in petrochemicals between members of the East African community. Due to the climate change policies, we therefore look at enforcement of stringent air quality standards that will reduce the CO2 emissions. To further support that, we intend to promote the use of energy efficient systems within the region and also stimulate research and development. I believe I must have skipped this slide on the Yambu crude oil to chemicals project that will be in Saudi Arabia. So this project is going to be developed jointly by Saudi Aramco and SABIC. That is projected to be operational in 2025. So the traditional oil processes will produce between 8 to 12% convert crude to petrochemicals. This project will aim at optimizing the traditional It aims at converting this crude to chemicals directly, and we are also looking at integration of the existing infrastructure of the Yambu refinery that will convert 70 to 80% of the crude oils to petrochemicals. How does Saudi Aramco and SABIC intend to do this? They have developed technologies. They have developed the research and development hubs whereby they do research on these crude to chemical projects. They have partnerships with leading petrochemical technology companies whereby they do testing of these chemicals, these technologies, and they do collaborate with local universities to partake the research and development. Again, this gentleman here, Dr. Fatih Birol, he's the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, says that our economies are heavily dependent on petrochemicals, but the sector receives far less attention than it deserves. Petrochemicals are one of the key blind spots in the global energy debate, especially given the influence they will exert on future energy trends. Okay, to conclude, within the region we have a limited crude refinery capacity, as it has been indicated that we require almost 200,000 barrels of products in a day. With the Uganda refinery, we'll have 60,000 plus the 10,000 from Bentui. That gives us 70,000. So within the region, we'll have a deficit of around 130 to 140,000 barrels. So the climate change actions then will lead to a decline in the demand for transport fuels. Therefore, this will force refiners to explore ways to yield high-value chemicals that will be profitable in the near future. Currently, the petrochemical industry largely remains underdeveloped. But again, even with the energy change policies or actions, the petrochemicals will still be essential in modern energy systems, because we look at the production of the electric car parts, we look at the production of wind turbines, and we'll also look at the production of solar panels, which will be will only exist if there exists the petrochemical industry. So then this leaves us with the option of strategizing within the community so that we can diversify the petroleum value chain through investments in the petrochemical industry. I leave you with a quote from Maurice Levy, which says, "Owning the oil field is not as important as owning the refinery, because what will make the big money is in refining the oil." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Idi Katana, for that precise presentation. Let's give Idi another round of applause, please. We can see from his presentation that there are many more things that we can do with our oil. In fact, petrochemicals seem to be more profitable than selling the oil as it is. It will be important for East African economies to look at diversifying into petrochemicals moving forward. I'll go back to our presenters. Do we have Tobias? Tobias Magige? No. Charles Rukono, by any chance? No. That means we only have 2 presenters for this session. Our next presenter is Solomon Kiptui Meningwo. Solomon is a senior petroleum officer working in the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum of Kenya. He graduated from Moi University with an engineering degree, BTech in mechanical and production engineering. He's currently involved in primary geological and geophysical data acquisition within the defined sedimentary basins in Kenya for the purpose of upgrading Kenya's primary technical database for hydrocarbon exploration. Please join me in welcoming Kiptui. Let's give him a round of applause.
Good evening. Sorry for the coarse voice. I just got a cold just recently. Maybe you could display my presentation, please. Okay. I'll be handling state of energy transition in Kenya, but basically most of the presentation was handled during the yesterday's session. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to speak to you today about the state of energy transition in Kenya. Next slide, please. Oh, before that, let me introduce myself. I'm Solomon Kiptui Meningwo. from the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Where do I press? As you may know, Kenya is one of the leading countries in Africa when it comes to the transition towards renewable energy. The country has made significant strides towards a sustainable energy future with a mix of government policies, private sector investment, and international cooperation driving the shift. Overall, Kenya's energy transition is making good progress, but challenges remain, particularly in terms of ensuring equitable access to clean energy, addressing energy poverty, and managing the intermittency of renewable energy sources. The objective of the study is basically four. One is to examine the relationship between Kenya's energy demand versus the population growth. Number two, to examine the sustainability of fossil fuel and renewable energy in Kenya. Number three, to examine which countries, developed or developing, contribute more environmental issues to green gas emissions and why. Number four, to examine potentiality of LNG as an alternative fossil fuel. From the results obtained, the graph shows the relationship between population growth and energy consumption in Kenya from the CESI's sustainability assessment of micro hydropower projects, Kenyan case study by Lilis Katumbi. From the graph, you can see that as the population is increasing, so is also the energy demand. There's a direct relationship between increasing population and demand for energy in Kenya. That is from the period 1980. The study was done from 1980 to 2014. Other results also shows that Kenya's energy demand has been growing rapidly in recent years, driven by a combination of population growth, urbanization, and economic development. Number two, renewable energy is unsustainable due to challenges such as policy uncertainties, inadequate infrastructure, grids, unstable financial situation, and limited access to private and foreign financing. That one was even greatly handled by the PS of Uganda. Number three, according to the Union of Concerned Scientists from the graph, 2021 global carbon graph, we see that developed countries consume more global energy and contribute more to global greenhouse gas emissions than developed countries. As you can see, United States produces almost over 400,000 megatons of carbon dioxide compared to South Africa, which is also part of Africa, which is 1.2%. And then number four, one of the results is also availability of natural gas is in both Kenya and Tanzania, and I've got significant natural gas reserves which could be liquefied and exported or used domestically. So, conclusion and recommendation. One, Kenya's population is estimated to increase from 46 million to 65.5 million in the years 2015 to 2030. That means that as a country, we don't need to eliminate fossil energy sources, but we must add more energy sources. One of the presenters yesterday was saying we use our resources to fund the transition. So the resources that God has blessed us, we just don't neglect them. We use them to fund the energy transition. Number two, green energy requires huge infrastructure and is expensive. And there is big inequality gap between developed and developing countries on energy transition. Hence, adequate financing is required for energy transition to be achieved. Number three, Africa accounts for the smallest share of global greenhouse gas emissions, 3.8% compared to the largest emitters like China and the United States and the European Union, which account respectively 23%, 19%, 13% of global emissions. Therefore, it's the developed nations that need to focus more on energy transition because they are the biggest greenhouse emitters compared to developing countries. I remember even one of the presenters yesterday was saying that we as African nations, we need to forge our own way on matters to do with energy transition because we produce less gas compared to developing countries. Number 4, oil and gas are still in greater demand than ever. Oil and gas companies are still in operation today. Recently in Guyana country, ExxonMobil discovered a large oil reserve, meaning Kenya should pursue more oil and gas exploration activities, more so on LNG, which is considered clean energy, sorry. Current status of Kenya's energy transition. The Kenyan government is accomplishing its commitment to energy transition, fulfilling its mandate under the Paris Agreement to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 32% by 2030 by doing the following. 1, fostering international cooperation. Kenya has liaised with its neighboring country, Tanzania, to pursue a construction of LNG pipeline linking Tanzania, Dar es Salaam city to Mombasa coastal city. This will reduce the cost of energy. Number 2, Kenya is increasing investment in renewable energy. The government of Kenya has created policies and incentives to attract investment in renewable energy sources. This is done through tax incentives and feed-in tariffs and subsidies for renewable energy. Number 3, the government of Kenya, through the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum, are currently planning to engage in distribution of clean cooking gas project for schools. The government of Kenya has set a target of distributing LPG cylinders to around 500 schools per annum. This will conserve the environment because currently schools are using traditional sources of fuel like charcoal and firewood. So that way it will help in reducing destruction of the environment, and that way we'll be transitioning to clean energy. Number 4, strengthening energy governance and regulations. Kenya government has strong governance and regulations to ensure that energy sector operates efficiently, transparently, and in the public interest. The government has created policies and institutions that promote accountability, transparency, and completion in the energy sector. Policy implication for the government. Kenya government can take several policy implications in promoting a transition to a more sustainable and renewable energy system by promoting renewable energy. Kenya government can promote renewable energy by offering incentives to businesses that invest in renewable energy technologies such as solar, wind, and hydroelectric power. This will help reduce the country's reliance on fossil fuels and promote use of clean energy. Number 2, the government of Kenya can developing energy efficiency programs. Kenya government can develop energy efficient programs to encourage businesses and individuals to use energy more efficiently. Number 3, by increasing investment in energy storage. The Kenyan government can increase investment in energy storage by investing in energy storage solutions such as batteries and pumped hydro storage to help integrate variable renewable energy sources like wind and solar into the grid. So when we get energy from wind and solar, we can store that energy and then supply it later. Number 4, the government can establish renewable energy targets. Kenya government can establish renewable energy targets to ensure that specific percentage of countries' energy comes from renewable sources by a specific year. This will provide a clear framework for investors and businesses to plan their investment in the renewable energy sector. Number 5, by facilitating access to financing. The government can facilitate access to financing for renewable energy products through initiatives such as green bonds, guarantees, and other innovative financing mechanisms. Like yesterday, they were talking about, today they were talking about the biggest challenge to energy transition is financing. And there is both international financing and local financing. So if we can manage to finance, then we'll have a great strive when it comes to energy transition. So business opportunity, according to Worldometer, Kenya ranks 98 in the world in natural gas production and has estimated resources of around 2.7 trillion cubic feet of potential natural gas reserves in the Lamu Basin. When this is explored, it will further market Kenya's petroleum blocks, and many IOCs will invest in natural gas exploration. Number 2, Kenya and Tanzania's upcoming joint LNG project will create more business opportunities to invest, e.g. in the transport sector, such as gas pipeline construction and storage facilities such as regasification terminals. Number 3, natural gas will reduce the production cost in industries because it offers cheaper energy as compared to electricity, hence increased industrialization, leading to better economy in Kenya and the East African region. So I would like to thank you for this opportunity and thank the organizers for such a great and unique symposium and giving me the privilege to speak to you. I'm truly honored. I appreciate your attention. This brings us to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kiptui, for that, thought-provoking presentation. As we can see, we are in a paradox of a situation whereby we have resources, natural resources, that are underexplored, underexploited, but which can be of great benefit to the East African communities. And at the same time, we are talking about the energy transition. Climate change is real. So what do we do as East Africa? That is the thrust of the discussions, the deliberations that we're going to have today, going forward, the next 2 days. Thank you so much, Kiptui, for that. Can we give him a good round of applause? Very quickly, for the last time, sorry. Do we have Magige and Rukono by any chance? No chance. Okay, so we are going to have those 2 presentations for this session. Just a quick recap is the first presentation by Edie. It focused on petrochemicals and what we can do as East Africa to diversify our economies. And then we've had that presentation by Kiptui, which touches on the natural resources we have vis-a-vis the energy transition that we're currently going through. The floor is now open for a Q&A session. A simple ground rule: if you have a question, you lift up your hand, state your name, and then you can mention or say to whom your question is directed. One question at the back already.
Okay, thank you to the presenters and the moderator. I'm Shaidu Nuru from TPDC, Tanzania. So my question goes to Engineer Edie. You made a presentation on the crude to petrochemicals as a viable project to overcome the transportation costs that are associated with the pipeline constructions. But I'm eager to learn how feasible the project is in terms of economics when you compare it to constructing the pipeline. if you have numbers, at least the estimates, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Chinju Wycliffe, lecturer in Mackay University. My question goes to Engineer Edie. In your study, I've noticed on petrochemicals, you didn't state particularly which feedstocks you're looking at from the refinery to the petrochemical industry. Why am I asking this? Because if we look at the main feedstock, which is naphtha and LPG to the petrochemical industry, usually the products are usually ethylene. So, but research right now shows there is increasing demand for propylene. So how are we going to address that and to maximize profitability from this industry? My next question goes to Mr. EAPCE'23. I'm sorry if did I get the name right? Yes. From your discussion, I guess my question is, your discussion was on energy transition and how we should handle it. My question to you is, what do you think is the best strategy for us as members of the East African community to stem off the pressure from the Western world on us to stop using fossil fuels and move on to renewables? Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Professor, for those two questions. Any other question from the floor before we go to the answers? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. My question goes to the last presenter. Is it Mr. EAPCE'23? It is really a very wonderful presentation on a very delicate issue to do with the energy transition. In your presentation from the beginning, you said Kenya is doing very well in the energy transition. That means already Kenya has put some strategies, some frameworks, some programs, some maybe that we did not mention. But the question is, what qualifies Kenya to be good in the energy transition? What are in place? And at the end of your presentation also, you said Kenya is still in need of fossil fuel, badly also. So I don't know how we will reconcile these two statements. Number two, you know, Kenya is part of the East African community, and if you follow the presentations today, all the members, I mean the partner states are gearing towards exploiting the existing fossil fuels, and they are not going to immediately, you know, transition to green energy. So also here, do you mean Kenya can continue alone ahead with energy transition and then without integrating with the other partner state?
Thank you for that question. Are there any others? Okay. I think I'll invite Edie first to respond to the questions that pertain to his presentation, strategy to diversify to petrochemicals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your question. The question, if I got it well, is on how feasible is the conversion of crude to chemicals as vis-a-vis the construction of a pipeline. Is it correct? Yeah. So the gist of my presentation was on the diversification of the economy of the East African community. As much as we are looking at the production of fuels, as much as we are looking at the production of crude, the world is changing. there are these policies. You know, when these policies are taken, or even the actions are signed in Paris, we as technical teams are never there. You see? So in light of that now, what do we do with our crude? For instance, if now the policies have been implemented in our countries and there is no more exportation of crude, there is no more need for crude for fuels, what happens to our crude that is still on the ground? Do we stop exploration? Do we stop production? No, we cannot do that. As another option, we could look at conversion of crude directly to petrochemicals so that we can diversify our economy. I think that's fair enough. If you're not satisfied with my response, kindly, moderator, I'll see him. Yeah. But I think there is another question.
Yeah, there was more questions as the rapporteur. So the first brother from TPDC, he asked whether for your project, whether you have any numbers to show that they are feasible, whether, as in opposed to constructing a pipeline, whether you have any numbers or estimates, whether you did any economics. Then the second question was, there is an increased demand for propylene, yet the chemicals that you are mentioning are ethylene and such, so how do we deal with that?
Just to state facts clearly, I'm not opposed to the construction of crude oil pipeline. My point is, we need to look into ways. In case these policies catch up on us, what do we do with our resources? For now, I have not done economics with regard to constructing of a pipeline vis-a-vis the crude to chemicals project. But I believe I've showed a quote from Keith Koch, who is a senior director, business development and integrated projects at Hanwell UOP. These are the guys who develop these technologies. They are the guys who are in the refining programs or even a business. So the quote is, you can sell your fuels at $550 a ton or convert them further to petrochemicals and earn threefolds that. So by converting the crude to petrochemicals, we are adding value to our crude. The next is on feedstock to petrochemical. The feedstock that we are looking at is just conversion of that 70 to 80% of that barrel to chemicals. We are looking at the production of high-value chemicals. You know, the chemicals will include the ethylenes, that is the and also the butylene, toluene, and xylene. Those are the feedstocks that we look at from in the angle of crude oil. For ammonia and also methanol, I believe we have natural gas to serve as feedstocks for that. Thank you, moderator. I think I've answered all my questions.
Rapporteur, any more questions for Edie? Has he answered all of them?
So I'm not sure whether the professor is satisfied.
That will be the question.
Or he'll take it. For the sake of the cocktail. So the next question was for the second presenter, Kiptui. The first one was the best strategy for EAC to stem off the pressure from of not using fossil fuels. And whether Kenya is, he started by saying that Kenya is doing very well in energy transition. What qualifies Kenya to be that good? Qualify your statement. and then whether Kenya can go ahead and just transit without factoring or integrating the partner states.
The first question was about the best strategy that East African can forge its way, not to allow maybe pressure from other nations when it comes to transition. So me, in my own opinion, I think it's good for the East African countries to stand their ground and argue with facts. Especially one of the things that I had mentioned is about the emissions, because as Africans we really emit very little greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to argue with facts and show them that yes, we are with them in energy transition, but our emissions are less. That's number one. Number two, I would answer maybe like what our presenter talked about. Sometimes I think it's very difficult to negotiate with these people, even when you look at the world over today. Once the world agrees to move in a certain direction, it's quite difficult to oppose it. Remember, let me give an example. Even remember during the time of COVID, once the world decides everybody needs to be vaccinated or everybody needs to wear a mask, sometimes it's a bit difficult to negotiate with these people. So sometimes I think it's good also to stand your ground. And I know there are consequences, yes, but we have been blessed by abundance of natural resources. Like one of the presenters talked about here, that God has blessed us with these resources. So do we just leave them just because we are being told that we need to transition? So he argued and said we use our resources to aid in our transition, because various countries have got different challenges. The challenges in Kenya are not necessarily the challenges in Uganda and in Tanzania. Yeah. Secondly, what qualifies Kenyans to be the best in, one of the best in energy transition? So I would say Kenya, we are blessed with several green energy sources. One of the energy sources that we have in abundance is geothermal energy. And currently, Kenya produces 35% of the electricity produced in Kenya comes from geothermal. So we also have a wind power project in Turkana, one of the biggest. So with these two, I think we are very much qualified, especially in the East African region, as the leading when it comes to green energy, maybe followed by Tanzania. Number three, can Kenya continue ahead without integrating other nations, maybe in energy transition? I don't think it's a good idea, because climate change is a global phenomenon. So we are part of the global community. So we just need to argue with facts and show them that we will go in this direction. Yeah, so this question basically relates to the first question. Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks to our two presenters this evening, and thank you to you participants for holding up to. Sorry, is okay. I continue. Question.
Sorry, Chair, for interrupting. I was working with Kiptui on his paper, so while writing or coming up with the findings, we were asking ourselves, like, during the Ice Age, when we had very few people on Earth, the ice still melted and climate change happened, yet there were very few people. So what happened then? we qualify that right now it's us who are causing it. So, and currently the glaciers, that the ice in the North Pole is melting. When the scientists were going to find out what is happening, so they went to the lowest bit to carbon date and do such things, and they realized that it's actually melting from the bottom, not from the top. So we were asking ourselves, we don't have statements to qualify the same, so it was not presented, but we were asking ourselves that, are we the ones really causing this change? So the answer, which was mentioned by Waziri this morning from UG, is the fact that we will need to get fundings for our own developments. For instance, Norway licensed 40 blocks, which they will proceed to exploit. The North Sea, it's currently they're discovering and exploiting because they have the monies. But when it comes to Africa and Africans, they will be like, no, this is not clean energy and such. So you want to get the funding. So if we can sort out the funding bit, we are sorted. So maybe if we can put, I had this an engineer, this a professor, this so and so. If we can put our heads together and see how we can sort that out, then we are sorted.
Okay, thank you, Jamaldeen. It seems this is a very interesting topic. There's one more comment or question at the back from Vincent.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. And yeah, you're right. This is one of the emotive subjects when it comes to our sector. So my response to this would be, one, if you look at emissions and their contributions towards climate change, we can all agree that Africa is the least contributor. So in response to a question I think was asked about how we can counter this aggressive push towards clean energy. One of our thinking is like, let us also exhaust our quota. Once we reach even close to the emissions that are currently, we are looking at even from the presentation, even for 2021, then we can have this conversation. There are several ways of doing this. One is the way they get to throttle oil and gas projects is through funding. So we need as a region to come up with a way, even if it's a common fund, of funding our oil and gas projects. We have money. You see, if we fund, I will say if we start with Uganda, Kenya is already a producer under the EAPCE', you see. Now, Uganda is targeting first oil in 2025. You see, even as part of the revenues that accrue to you as a country from the sale of the produced oil, take a portion, put it in a fund. Over time, as more and more countries become producers, you're going to have your own fund. You prioritize what projects in the region that you're looking at, that you can pursue. And then you stand your ground, fund them, oversee those projects, you see. Because if you look at these countries, especially Europe, UK, that are pushing that we move from fossil fuels to clean energy, they have exhausted their resources. You see, so they are using us to push a narrative that helps reduce their dependency on a commodity that we have and is in demand. So it's not a conversation that we just follow what is given. I like what my colleague Kiptui pointed out. Let's also know how to stand our ground and make our case. Thank you for indulgence again, Chair.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for your contribution. I think you can see the kind of, thought-provoking presentations we are having. It's unfortunate that the time we have is quite limited. This is a discussion that could go on and on, with good ideas that can help us, come up with solutions to how to exploit our fossil resources in the face of this onslaught from Western countries about the energy transition and climate change. And it's true, I remember, just to add my voice a bit to this discussion, I remember a few years back, Kenya was thinking of developing a coal plant in Lamu. It was a 965 megawatt coal plant. The proposal faced a lot of obstacles, and in the end, Kenya shelved this plan. I come to the point Kiptui, our presenter, was making about arguing with facts and how we need to package our information. Because the countries, or these Western countries that were so opposed to this project, you know, through the World Bank, through IMF, are the same countries that produce a lot of coal power. Our power plant was only 965 megawatts, and it was going to be developed in phases of 300 and something megawatts, 10 years, another 335, you know, according to demand. And there were all these arguments about what it is going to do to the pristine environment of Lamu, this small coastal city on the Indian Ocean of Kenya. You know, looking at the figures, they were very minimal compared to what the US, China, the UK are banning and have been banning for so many years. For instance, the UK has been generating 50,000 megawatts of power from coal for the last 100 years. And yet they have a problem with us generating just 900 megawatts of coal power. I mean, it's unreasonable. It's unreasonable. So, you know, it's upon us, as Vincent says, that we need to also know how to package our information as we go out to, you know, exploit our resources. Thank you very much. It's coming to just about 8 o'clock. A minute to 8. I know the cocktail is well underway. I would like to thank you all for your participation, the presenters. Thank you very much for those, you know, very good presentations, the plenary for your patience and your questions. I think it will be a good point at this time to stop, and I wish you a nice cocktail this evening and a very good conference moving forward for the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
The oil and gas moment. The oil and gas moment. The oil and gas moment. Brought to you by Petroleum Authority of Uganda. Creating lasting value in Uganda's oil journey. The development and commercialization of Uganda's oil and gas resources is being undertaken through 4 flagship projects, which will bring in investment over $15 billion into the economy. The Kingfisher project will produce 40,000 barrels of crude oil per day at peak. The Tilenga project will produce 190,000 barrels of crude oil per day at peak. The 1,443-kilometer East African crude oil pipeline project will transport the produced crude oil to access the international market via the Tanga port in Tanzania. The Uganda refinery project will process up to 60,000 barrels of oil per day to provide petroleum products to the Ugandan market and its immediate neighbors. Additional exploration work is ongoing in the Kanyotava and Ngasa areas in the Albertine Graben. For more information, visit www.pau.go.ug. Petroleum Authority of Uganda, creating lasting value in Uganda's oil journey.
Amanya inzi Salongo Kizito Sula nga mpanga lya ku kitundu kuno